Tri-Cities Community Television presents coverage of the Port Moody Commemorative Council meeting that was originally held in Port Moody on April 7th, 1913.
Again, thank you all for taking time this weekend to join us in celebrating the milestone in Port Moody's history. And I would like to now introduce you to Port Moody's Mayor and Council. Firstly, Mayor Perry D. Rowe, played by Mayor Mike Clay. Alderman Arthur Bernard White, played by Councillor Diana Dilworth. Alderman Montague Robert Otley, played by Councillor Rosemary Small. Alderman John Murray, played by Councillor Rick Glumac. Alderman J. William McNeese, played by Councillor Zoe Royer. Alderman W. D. McKay, played by former Mayor John Northey. Alderman J. M. McLean, played by Councillor Bob Elliott. Alderman M. R. Britton, played by former Mayor and Freedom of the City recipient David Driscoll. And Alderman James A. Clark, played by Councillor Jerry Nuttall. I would also like to recognize some special guests, and I respectfully ask that you hold your applause for this next round until the end, just to assist us in moving along the proceedings expeditiously. I would like to begin with special guest Mayor Greg Moore from Port Coquitlam, as City Clerk William Johnson Ferguson. We'd also like to recognize and thank our sponsors, Heritage Canada and Andrew Peller Limited, for their support. I see special guests Dr. David and Donna Spence as Colonel Moody and wife Mary. And I would also like to welcome the following VIPs as follows. Minister James Moore, MP, Port Moody, Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam. Mr. Kirk Sagi, Andrew Peller Limited. Acting Mayor Carissa Bell, District of Maple Ridge. Councillor Mike Forrest, City of Port Coquitlam. Mrs. Ann Hulbert, Freedom in the City. Mr. and Mrs. L. and Nellie Sholin, Freedom in the City. Mayor Richard Stewart, City of Coquitlam. MLA Joe Trazzolini, Port Moody, Coquitlam. Mayor Deb Walters, City of Pet Meadows. Councillor Dean Washington, City of Port Coquitlam. Mr. Keith Watkins, School District 43 School Trustee. Mayor Heather Anderson, Village of Anmore. MP Finn Donnelly, Westminster, Coquitlam, Port Moody. And Dr. Elaine Golds, Freedom in the City. So thank you very much for all the VIP guests. Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to turn over the proceedings to you.
Thank you, sir. And our first order of business, of course, we need to appoint an acting clerk. So before we can move on with the meeting, I would make the following motion that G.L. Churchard be acting clerk until the official clerk be appointed.
I'll second that, Your Worship.
And I would like to call the question of council, then all those in favor.
Aye. Aye.
Are there any opposed? Seeing none, J.L. Churchard, we appoint you as the acting clerk until the conclusion of the election later.
Thank you, Worship.
Now, our first order of business, and this is such an exciting time for us in Port Moody as we finally have realized our dream of becoming a city. But it's not just the fun part. We have the serious business of council. So, gentlemen, I feel that at this first meeting of council of the newly organized City of Port Moody, I will take the liberty of presenting what I consider the main points to be covered during the present year. It's our privilege to lay the foundations, and we must be careful that the succeeding councils do not find it necessary to undo any of our work. Don't touch that one. There's a large amount of work I would like to see done, and I request that the money involved is such that at present borrowing is both difficult and costly. And this condition will probably not exist next year, when it will be a lot easier for us to get money. And in the meantime, we can organize and be prepared to do the work in an efficient manner. Streets and sidewalks. I believe that all work on streets and sidewalks, except temporary repairs, should be done under local improvement plans, and that you should pass local improvement general bylaw at as early a date as possible. I believe by adopting the above principle, Our general tax rate need not exceed 10 mils. A low value of taxation will be attractive to manufacturers, home builders, and investors alike. Exemptions from taxation of improvements, I believe that a bylaw should be submitted at an early date exempting ordinary improvements from taxation. For water supply, it is imperative that this question be taken up at once and the source from which we are to draw our supply be determined so that we complete our systems as early as possible. Fire protection. Until the completion of our water system, I would suggest that we investigate the question of chemical engines and the organization of an efficient fire brigade. For our city offices, accommodations will have to be provided for the city clerk, engineer, council chamber, and a lockup. In regard to a hall, such as has been suggested, suitable for holding public meetings, I will say that I believe that when completed, should be separate from the city offices. Streetlights, I believe a number of streetlights should be installed, and an effort made to secure a lower rate for domestic use. Revenue. It's quite evident that the limited amount of revenue available this year will little more than cover the expenses of the necessary staff and ordinary repairs, and it would be necessary to borrow in order to proceed with new work. This subject will require serious consideration. And regarding new subdivisions, I would recommend that before plans for subdivisions be accepted, that all streets be rough graded and the timber slashed and burned. That was Mayor Rowe's inaugural council address of 1913.
Thank you, Your Worship. I did, in my haste of listing the names of VIPs, I did miss Mayor Ralph Keith from Belcarra, so my apologies. I recognize you get it. The city has initiated a process to fill the position of city clerk, and the incorporation committee has submitted a report on the clerkship with the following recommendation, which I shall read. The incorporation committee recommend the following applications be received for the position of clerk: G.B. Taylor, W.G. Ferguson, H.R. Mackenzie, Thomas Shepard, W.B. Bauer, and that the whole of the correspondence relating to the applications be turned over to council of the city of Port Moody with a special recommendation of the above applicants.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Is there discussion from council?
Well, I think 5 is too many to consider at first. I think we should look at shortlisting candidates.
And Your Worship, I'd like to say, I don't see any woman's name down here. Is this going to create a problem later on?
I concur. I sure hope that in the future there will be more women deciding to enter the workforce with so many of our men's brute strength required in the lumber mills and our factories. Don't you think that women should be considered for jobs like clerk of a municipality? Hear, hear.
But they can't vote yet.
Is there further discussion of council, or shall we?
I would move that all names be eliminated except Mackenzie, Taylor, and Ferguson.
Second.
Motion is seconded. Call the question to eliminate all names except for the 3 noted. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none opposed, we shall carry on to ballot with the 3 names. Shall I get a motion that we proceed to ballot?
I make that motion, Your Worship, that we proceed to ballot.
Second?
Very well. I'll call that question in favor.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. Thank you. Acting City Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will pass along the ballots, and I would like to remind the aldermen that they are to make note of 1 name only on the ballot.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk.
The ballots, Your Worship.
Sure.
Staying horror, I think.
Well, we have an interesting result here. We don't have a clear winner on our first ballot. I have Ferguson with 4 votes, Taylor with 3, and Mackenzie with 1. So per our procedure, I take leave of council that we would eliminate Taylor and have a further ballot with just, eliminate Mackenzie and have a further ballot with just Ferguson and Taylor.
Are you eliminating Mackenzie, Your Worship, or simply the ballot?
And I would like clarification for that also, Your Worship.
I shall suggest then that we eliminate Mackenzie from the ballot. We proceed to second ballot with a choice of Taylor or Ferguson.
Second ballot, Your Worship.
Sure. So on our second ballot counting, I have Taylor, 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 and Ferguson. Congratulations, Mr. Ferguson. I now appoint you the new city clerk for the city. Shall I have a prompt motion of council that we destroy the ballots?
Just as a point of interest, as Clerk Ferguson makes his way to the frontier, I'd like to share some interesting history on the decision. On April 16th, 1913, the city received a letter from H.R. Mackenzie, as you recall, received 1 vote in the first round and no votes in the second round. Mackenzie claimed that an injustice was done to him on the balloting and provided a copy of the declaration of 3 of the aldermen, which basically spoke to their votes on the balloting. So in response, City Council struck a committee that was appointed to investigate the situation and take steps to clear up the matter. And however, in the end, there was actually no change in the clerkship. Thank you, Worship. Yeah.
Because, of course, everything was done on the up and up. Now, before we move into the general bylaw discussions of council, I have to say I was enjoying some beverages with some residents in the Burrard Hotel last Wednesday night, and some of them said they were finding it difficult on their way, making their way home from the Burrard because the trains were causing issues at these crossings that we have. I promised the residents that I would bring their concerns to council, and I'm sure that council probably shares their concerns, but perhaps council has some input. Councillor, please.
Your Worship, it's really important that we deal with this issue, the safety issue regarding CP Rail. Our trains carry mainly timber destined for Eastern Canada, but it's entirely possible that in the future we will be loading ships for perhaps bound for India or even China. Impossible to envision right now, but who knows what kind of hazardous goods Alberta Premier Arthur Sifton will want to ship through Port Moody in the future. So, Your Worship, it is with a great deal of consideration for the safety of our families that our children that I support this, that we really address this issue on safety issues.
Hear, hear.
Councillor Alderman McNeice and your vivid dreams of a ship that goes to China carrying cargo. Well, Alderman Clark, I'm sure you'll bring some sensibility to this discussion.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. I don't know about the CPR trains and what they're bringing through, but the problem with the crossing is that there are no planks. So when the tires go over the crossings, they go over the rails and bang down and could get stuck when a train comes. That is the essential problem with the crossing. So I'm going to make a motion that the clerk be instructed to write to the CPR drawing their attention to the dangerous and unsafe crossings of Kyle, Queens, and Moody Streets, the sidewalks and roadways being unplanked across the tracks and other defects.
Very good, Alderman. Is there a
I'll
second?
second that, Your Worship, realizing that unless we look after this now, we're going to be dealing with it for the next 100 years.
Your Worship,
Alderman.
railway companies should be held to the highest standard when it comes to the maintenance of railway tracks and crossings. I sincerely hope this council will support this motion.
Very well. Is there further conversation on council?
Just have one comment, if I may, Your Worship. The location at which you were getting citizen input may have contributed to the nature of the complaint. My concern in coming here today is that we seem to have some members of our community that are using the footpaths for horses. I very nearly, indeed, did step in something. And I'm wondering whether that's occurring on the railway crossings as well. And we might encourage people to be either using the horses at the side or your friends who are imbibing to be careful where they step.
I think you probably will.
Good point, Alderman. I'm sure our clerk can address that issue as well in their report. Alderman McLean.
Yes, I would like to just expound on that. It's a slippery issue, Alderman, and I think we shouldn't go there at the moment. So I will be supporting the motion.
Alderman McLean chooses to tread carefully.
Yes.
So perhaps we could revisit that at a future meeting.
I'm happy with your direction.
We will take the motion that has been moved and seconded, and I shall call the vote of council. All those in favor?
Aye.
And seeing none opposed, unanimously carry that motion. Thank you. Mr. Clerk, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for your vote of confidence, council. Next item is the bylaw to borrow, which was actually debated on April 16th, 1913. You remember?
Very well, thank you, Mr. Clerk. Alderman Murray.
Well, thank you, Mr. Rowe. Now, I've been given due consideration to the previous item on the agenda, and I think we should utilize this $10,000 to build ourselves a bridge, twirly-whirly bridge. Goes up and over and then under. And people, I believe, will come from miles away just to drive across this bridge and safely cross the railroad tracks and won't have to worry about the planks and all of that. It's just in fact, I think we should put a train station in the middle of this whirly-twirly bridge.
Hear, hear.
Alderman Murray, you're clearly from the western end of Port Moody.
I am indeed.
As such, we understand your opinions. I wonder if any other member of council has a matter of consideration. Alderman McLean.
I happen to be from the east side of Port Moody, and we don't have this problem, Your Worship. Maybe perhaps because we live in a little better area of Port Moody than the west side. And I truly get tired of the west side dictating to the eastern section of Port Moody. They seem to want more and more, and the east side is paying more and more for them. So I probably will not be supporting this motion from Alderman Murray.
Well, Alderman McLean, we know in the future that neighborhoods won't be competing with each other for tax dollars as we're having today. These problems will be long behind us when we do this one borrowing bylaw and never have to borrow money again. Alderman White.
Until we have such time as secured revenue coming in, I think it is absolutely crucial that we borrow money. I campaigned on a platform of saving money where possible with a volunteer fire department, but I also campaigned on a platform of taxing appropriately wild lands and businesses. When I look at the success of the BC oil refinery and the success of the Thurston and Flavel sawmill, I fully believe that they should be contributing higher taxes to help support the creation of a new and prosperous Port Moody.
Excellent points, Alderman. Is there a motion of council that we'd like to consider?
I would move first reading of the bylaw that's before us.
Sorry, Alderman.
Otherwise, people will keep talking.
The motion is moved and seconded then that the leave to be granted to introduce a bylaw to borrow $10,000 from the Royal Bank. Seeing no further discussion, I shall call the question of those in favor.
Aye.
And are there any opposed?
I'm opposed, Your Worship.
Alderman McLean from the east side of Port Moody.
Yes.
Is opposed to the borrowing. Mr. Clerk, I believe the process now is first reading of the bylaw.
That is correct, and I do want to make a note to the audience that subsequent reports that 8 directors of the Royal Bank were themselves preparing a form of loan bylaw. So this particular motion was held and considered at a later date and passed unanimously.
I guess Alderman McLean had a change of heart at some point.
Well, that was 100 years ago, and I've learned a lot since then, Your Worship. So maybe I can be swayed on later on. So.
I thought it's because you moved.
Alderman White.
I should point out in the bylaw, it does indicate the significant cost of borrowing of 7% interest of this loan.
Very well, then on first reading, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed? Alderman McLean remains opposed. And we'll call the question then on second reading. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Alderman McLean remains opposed.
And I'm going to check when I get home tonight too, Your Worship, I'm sure, for opposing this.
Properly so.
So lastly, we need to consider a motion that the bylaw to borrow $10,000 be read a third time forthwith, and for that purpose that any vote to the contrary be suspended in as far as it relates to the same.
So moved.
Second.
And any further discussion on council? I'll call that question then. All those in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed? And Alderman McLean is being his rebellious self and remaining opposed. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. The next item is presented to Council about city accounts, and I will just review them for you. That Clark and Stewart Company Stationery, $35.05. Thomas Stationery Engineering Supplies, $22.83. W.J. Ferguson, that's me, 23 days of service as city clerk, $94.52. C.A. Mills, 8 days, chief of police, $26.30. David and Leslie, 15 days service as city engineer, $150. Works yard payroll, 24.5 days at $3 a day, $24.50.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. For council's consideration.
$55 for stationery, Your Worship. What are we making, roads or paper? Do we have a place big enough to store it? Pages.
Alderman Clark.
Alderman Clark. Yes, Your Worship.